You can't leave. The clerk's whisper cut through the quiet like a snapped wire. I had rehearsed this moment all morning. Stand straight. Smile once. Hand over the paperwork. I slid my folder across the counter, my fingers still smelling faintly of bleach from the motel bathroom where I had washed my only blouse. $18 sat folded in my pocket. My eviction notice pressed warm against my ribs. The clerk's eyes stayed locked on her screen. Her jaw tightened. A pause stretched, long enough to make the room feel smaller. "I need you to step to the side with me," she murmured, already rising from her chair. A red icon pulsed on her monitor, not flashing, breathing. "I'm just replacing a passport," I offered, my voice thin but polite. "I have a job waiting in Nevada." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "This won't take long." The moment I crossed the frosted glass door, it clicked shut behind me. The story in the video is a creative work by Revenge World. All characters and events are fictional, crafted to convey a humanistic message and the values of family. A uniformed guard appeared near the doorway, posture neutral, hand resting too close to his belt. The clerk lowered her voice again. "There's a discrepancy with your identity." My throat went dry. A typo. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then stilled. "Your social security number matches a record flagged as deceased." The word hit harder than the eviction notice. Deceased. That's impossible. My laugh came out wrong. "I'm standing right here." She glanced up, and something like pity flickered across her face. "I know." Another door opened behind us. Footsteps approached, measured and unhurried. "Ms. Holt." A calm voice called from the hallway. "We need to clarify a few things." As I turned toward it, I understood something before anyone explained it. This wasn't a mistake that could be fixed with patience. If you've ever felt the floor shift under your life, stay with me. What happened next rewrote everything I thought I owed the world. The man from the hallway stopped a few feet away. Eyes steady, voice level. "Aaron Holt." "Correct." I nodded, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the small room. "My name is Ethan Cole. I work with the Office of Inspector General." He angled his badge just enough for me to register it without inviting comfort. "You're not in trouble, but we need to slow this down." The clerk backed toward the door, relief written all over her posture, as if the weight had been transferred. The guard remained. "I don't understand what's happening. I managed. If this is about paperwork, I can come back another day." Ethan's expression didn't change. "This isn't a paperwork issue." He pulled a chair out and waited until I sat before taking the opposite one. No rush, no intimidation. That, somehow, made it worse. "Your passport application triggered a federal identity conflict," he explained. "Your name exists, your number exists, but they don't belong to the same person." My fingers curled into my palms. People get mixed up all the time. "That's true." A brief pause followed. Deliberate. "In your case, the original holder of that number was declared dead in Northern California in 1990. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. "You're telling me someone stole my identity." His gaze held mine. "I'm telling you that, on paper, Aaron Holt stopped existing before she could walk." The guard shifted his weight. The sound grounded me just enough to speak. "I've paid taxes. I've voted. I've worked since I was 14. Ethan leaned forward, voice quieter now. "And that's why we're here." He slid a thin folder across the table. Unopened. "We don't believe you did anything wrong." My name stared back at me from the label, suddenly unfamiliar. Ethan opened the folder at last. Not a photograph of a crime scene, not a list of charges. A face stared up at me instead, older than a toddler, younger than a woman, sketched forward by years and algorithms. That's not me. I breathed, then stopped. The eyes were mine. The crooked line of the nose, even the scar under the brow that no one ever noticed. "That's who you would have been allowed to become." Ethan offered gently. "Your birth name is Rebecca Sloan." The name landed like a dropped plate. Clean. Heavy. Unfamiliar. I was adopted. I pushed back. Closed adoption. I have papers. You do. His hands stayed flat on the table. They begin in 1992, 2 years after a child named Rebecca Sloan was taken from a playground in Northern California. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. She was 2. He continued, recovered briefly during a disrupted handoff, then lost again. A second page slid forward, a hospital bracelet, a birth record, a grainy bulletin stamped missing. My parents named me Aaron, I whispered, clinging to the word like a rope. They named you Rebecca. His voice softened without yielding ground. Thomas and Judith Sloan. They never stopped looking. They built their lives around it. Another page appeared. A brief summary. A trust administered by a regional logistics and energy services company. An estimated value of $7.4 million. That isn't my life, I protested. I scrub floors. I sleep in my car. That is your life, Ethan replied. And this is what was taken from it. The guard cleared his throat near the door. Ethan acknowledged him with a glance, then returned to me. They're flying in from San Francisco, he added. They asked for you by name. My hands shook. Erin Holt is real. She is, he agreed. She just isn't the beginning. The door behind us stayed closed. The name Rebecca Sloan echoed in my chest, steady and unavoidable. My adoption was legal. The words came out sharp, defensive. Calvin Holt filed everything himself. Ethan didn't flinch. That part is true. Relief surged, brief and fragile, before he continued. You entered foster care after the recovery attempt failed. Temporary placement. Emergency status. He tapped the folder once. Your case should have been reviewed by the state within 6 months. It never was, I muttered. Memory stirred Calvin's voice. Calm and absolute, telling me paperwork was boring, telling me he'd handle it. He intervened. Ethan continued. Requested direct adoption, signed off as both petitioner and approving authority. My chest tightened. He was sheriff. Yes. The word carried weight. He had access. Images broke through without warning. A narrow bed wedged between the washer and dryer. My school backpack searched every night. My birth certificate locked in a drawer I was never allowed to open. You should be grateful. Calvin's voice echoed, familiar and cold. Most kids don't get chosen. I swallowed hard. He saved me. He controlled you, Ethan corrected. Not unkindly. He knew what questions would lead back to 1990. He made sure you never asked them. A laugh escaped me, brittle. I thought the rules were about discipline. They were about silence. Another memory surfaced. Paige Holt, blonde and confident, stretching across the couch while I stood waiting for permission to sit. She's my real daughter. Calvin used to remind me, don't forget your place. I pressed my palms to the table, grounding myself. So the adoption wasn't mercy. Ethan's gaze held steady. It was camouflage. The room felt smaller again, not from walls closing in, but from the truth finally taking up all the space. I had just lifted the phone from the table. The screen lit my palm, warm and unreal. The door behind me opened without a knock. 2 deputies stepped in first, uniforms crisp, expressions carefully blank. Then Calvin Holt filled the doorway, taller than I remembered, shoulders squared beneath his sheriff's badge. There you are. His voice carried authority wrapped in familiarity. We need to go. My body reacted before my mind did. Shoulders tightening, chin lowering, years of training snapping into place. Ethan moved first, placing himself slightly between us. This is a federal matter. You don't have jurisdiction here. Calvin's smile didn't waver. A folded document appeared in his hand, placed neatly on the table. Felony warrant, theft of personal property valued at $32,000, signed and active. That's a lie. My words broke free, sharp and uncontrolled. I haven't been in your house in years. His gaze finally landed on me, cool and assessing. Save it for booking. One deputy reached for my arm. I pulled back instinctively. This is obstruction, Ethan warned, tension cutting through his calm. She's under federal review. Calvin stepped closer, lowering his voice until it pressed against my ear. I warned you not to dig. You always did have trouble listening. Cold slid down my spine. Handcuff her, he instructed, eyes never leaving mine. Metal closed around my wrists. The sound echoed louder than it should have. You don't get to take her. Ethan pushed back, stepping forward. Calvin's attention flicked away for the first time. I'm doing my job. State charge, immediate custody. He leaned in again. Breath steady, words meant only for me. You leave this building, and you don't make it out clean. Remember what happens when you forget your place. The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering against the table as they started pulling me toward the door. The pressure on my arms dragged me down a hallway, and the floor blurred into another night entirely. Rain, cold, a garbage bag tearing at the seam. You're old enough to figure it out. Calvin's voice rang in my head, steady and unbothered. I've done my part. I had stood on the porch then, shoes soaked through, knuckles white around everything I owned. The door had stayed open just long enough for one last lesson. You should be thanking me, that voice had continued, satisfied. I kept a roof over your head for 18 years. That costs money. Inside, laughter, the scrape of a chair. Paige's voice floated past the glass. Dad, can I have more steak on porcelain? Warm light. A life that never included me. I didn't ask for much. I remembered whispering, shame heavy on my tongue. And that's why this works, Calvin had replied, closing the door. You know your place. The hallway snapped back into focus. My wrists burned against the cuffs. It hadn't been discipline. It hadn't been sacrifice. It had been training. The grip on my arms tightened, dragging me forward, and something inside me went still. I stopped fighting. My knees buckled. My weight dropped. The sudden slack pulled one deputy off balance. Boots scraping as we lurched to a halt. Get up! Calvin's command cracked sharp, irritation bleeding through authority. I stayed where I was, spine heavy, breath slow. Years of cleaning motel rooms had taught me one thing: dead weight couldn't be moved cleanly. Stop this, one deputy muttered. Uncertain now. I lifted my head just enough to see Ethan at the far end of the corridor, already moving, hand rising toward his radio. Check the entry logs. My voice carried farther than I expected. Steady and clear. I've been in federal custody since 9/12 this morning. Calvin's face hardened. She's stalling. Get her to the elevator. Look at the cameras. I pressed on, louder now. Timestamps don't lie. A beat of hesitation rippled through the deputies. Long enough. Ethan's stride lengthened. Hold it. His voice cut in, sharp and unmistakable. Nobody moves. Uniforms appeared from the security checkpoint, Federal Protective Service stepping into place with practiced precision. Calvin spun toward them, anger flashing. This is my arrest. Ethan closed the distance, gaze locked on the folded paper in Calvin's hand. Then, let's see the warrant. The hallway went quiet. My wrists still burned, but the pull on my arms eased. The balance had shifted, and everyone felt it. Ethan took the warrant without ceremony. His eyes scanned the page once, then lifted toward the digital clock mounted above the corridor doors. 8:46, he noted calmly. Calvin's jaw tightened. That's the time it was signed. Ethan turned the paper so everyone could see. The alleged offense occurred at 9:20. One of the deputies frowned. That's what it says. Ethan shifted his focus to the security monitor at the end of the hall. And this building logs every entry. A guard tapped the screen. My name appeared beside a grainy image of me stepping through the metal detectors. Entry recorded at 9:12. The guard confirmed. Silence fell hard. Ethan's voice cut through it. She's been in federal space since 9/12. Unless she learned to teleport, she couldn't steal anything at 9:20. The deputy holding my left arm loosened his grip. The other followed a second later, stepping back as if burned. Calvin scoffed, forcing a laugh. Clerical error. Happens all the time. Not on sworn affidavits, Ethan countered. Falsifying one is perjury. Calvin's hand drifted toward his belt, stopping just short of the holster. Sweat beaded along his hairline. You're overreaching, he snapped. The kidnapping was in 1990. Statutes long expired. Ethan nodded once, almost thoughtful. Criminally. You're right. Relief flickered across Calvin's face. Then Ethan continued. Civil fraud involving a minor doesn't expire, and assets obtained through fraud don't belong to the holder. A folder appeared in Ethan's hand, thicker than the last. Constructive trust doctrine. Calvin's confidence cracked. Those assets are mine. I stepped forward, wrists aching, but steady. You held them for me. Ethan gestured toward the officers. Freeze his accounts. Seize the property. The deputies moved, this time without hesitation. Calvin's authority collapsed in the space of a breath, leaving only a man cornered by the truth. Calvin was led away without looking back. The cuffs clicked with a finality that didn't feel like revenge, only relief. Ethan placed a single document in front of me. Asset transfer authorization. You don't have to sign today. I picked up the pen anyway. My hand was steady. Sell everything. My voice carried softly. Use it to protect kids who don't get second chances. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. That choice matters. Outside, the parking structure hummed with late afternoon traffic. Two figures stood near the elevator bank, hesitant, as if afraid to cross an invisible line. A man with my eyes. A woman clutching her coat too tightly. We're here, the woman offered, careful not to step closer. I let the silence breathe. I know. They waited. No demands, no claims. I'm not ready to be found. I continued, surprising myself with how true it felt. But I'm ready to exist. The man swallowed. Whenever you are. I walked past them to my car, the ache in my wrists fading with every step. Freedom didn't arrive as fireworks or apologies. It arrived as choice. If this story reached you because you've ever been told to be grateful for pain, stay with us. Share it with someone who needs to hear that survival isn't debt and truth doesn't expire. I started the engine, rolled down the window, and drove toward a life I finally owned.